He's one of the most influential thinkers of our times. Heads of states and leaders of the world's biggest companies are eager to listen to him. Yuval Noah Harari is a 43-year-old professor and the author of Sapiens and Homo Deus. We talked to him in Budapest.
Mr. Harari, thank you for joining us in the global conversation. Let's start with a bet. As the European parliamentary elections are coming, the future of the EU is in the focus of debates. How much would you be willing to wager that in 15 years there will still be a European Union?
I don't know. And as a historian, what I do know is that you cannot predict the future of such things. Very often the most unexpected things happen in history. That's the only sure thing about history. Just a few months before the 1989 revolutions in Eastern Europe, nobody expected that. 5 years before that, it would have seemed like science fiction. So also with the future of the EU, you can't tell. I hope that voters will make the right decisions and will keep the EU because it is essential, not just for the peace of Europe and the prosperity of Europe, it's really essential for the peace and prosperity of the entire world.
In your books, you emphasize that cooperation can be the answer for global challenges. But nowadays it seems that cooperation is difficult worldwide. Nationalism has strengthened across Europe. Why do you think it became popular, and what should be the answer for that?
People should realize humankind is now facing three existential threats that cannot be solved on the national level. They can only be solved on the global level. These threats are nuclear war and climate change and technological disruption, especially the rise of artificial intelligence and bioengineering. AI and bioengineering could destroy what it means to be human. And the only way to deal with it is by global cooperation. If we start an arms race in artificial intelligence or an arms race in genetics, this guarantees the destruction of humanity. Whoever wins the arms race doesn't matter. Humanity will be the loser.
Binary thinking can be dangerous as well, as far as nationalism is concerned.
Nationalism has a good side and a bad side. Nationalism has been among the most positive developments of human history, but also has a dangerous side. The positive side of nationalism is that it enables millions of strangers to care about one another and to cooperate. The evil side, the other side of nationalism, is about hating foreigners. And I think this is not the essence of nationalism. Part of the problem you see today in certain parts of the world is that instead of focusing on loving your compatriots, you have people focusing on hating foreigners. You have people who often could be corrupt. They take money from the healthcare system. They don't really advance the interests of their fellow citizens. But then they present themselves as very good patriots. Why? Because they hate foreigners.
Lots of people only wish to reinforce their beliefs or opinion instead of reading credible news.
Yes.
And how can we get back to the path of rational discussion when some leaders avoid meaningful answers by pointing out on scapegoats like George Soros or Fethullah Gulen or the liberals?
Yeah. Well, this was always, it's not a new trick, it was always the case. What's new now is that we have these immensely powerful new technologies for hijacking and abusing human attention. The problem we are facing now is technology overcoming our weaknesses. We now have powerful technology that can identify your weaknesses, what you already fear, what you already hate, and grab your attention by pressing these emotional buttons. So this is one of the reasons that we need to regulate these dangerous technologies to protect humans from being hacked, from being exploited, to protect human attention from being abused.
Aren't you afraid an Orwellian-style dictatorship will misuse this big data?
I'm very much afraid. I think that now the technology makes it possible to create far more totalitarian regimes than anything we've seen in human history, even more extreme than what George Orwell imagined. Because Orwell imagined a situation in which there is a totalitarian regime that monitors you all the time, but only what you do in the outside world. Where you go, whom you meet, what you say. Now we are getting the technology to monitor people 24 hours a day, the entire population, but even what's happening inside their bodies with biometric sensors and with the combination of AI and biotechnology. There are already, for example, schools in China where students wear these biometric bracelets. Now it's being used, they say, for educational purposes. The teacher knows if you fell asleep, if you are bored, if you are having difficulties, but the same technology can be used for political purposes. So what we saw in the 20th century with Stalin and Hitler and Mao will be nothing compared to these totalitarian regimes that are already starting to be built today.
What is the danger if there would be an elite who can even afford to long life, yes, and downtrodden masses who are useless?
If we don't utilize the new technologies correctly, then the result is what you describe. Biotechnology will be used to upgrade a small elite into a superhuman status, whereas most people are left far behind. So you have humankind splitting into different species. For the first time in history, the rich will be a different species from the poor. That's the greatest inequality in history. A lot of jobs will disappear, but new jobs will emerge. The really big problem won't be the absolute absence of jobs. The big problem will be retraining people. People will have to change their jobs again and again and to learn throughout their lives. And at present, the education system does not prepare them for that.
Finally, some personal questions. As a citizen of Israel, how your thoughts are influenced when you hear constantly shellings and the sirens?
I don't hear constantly. I mean, it happens just now and then. The situation in Gaza is really terrible for the people living there. But in Israel, most of the time, most people live a very normal life. It certainly influences my thinking. I think it makes me far less naive about many of these developments. If I lived in San Francisco, then I could easily have these rosy visions of, yes, technology is wonderful, it's doing all these wonderful things for humankind. You live in Israel, you realize that humankind has a lot of dark sides to it.
Every year you take a long meditation trip. How can you find your way back in your everyday life after this?
Everything is rushing so fast. The technology, the politics, it's more important than ever to take time off, to completely disconnect, to give yourself the time to get to know yourself, really, to think deeply about these issues. We don't have time almost for anything, and we need to make the most important decisions in the history of humankind in the next few years. We now have divine powers of creation and destruction, and it's humans, not gods, who need to decide what to do with them. One of my concerns when I go and meet these important people, I just met Mark Zuckerberg in California, and I just met Sebastian Kurz in Austria. And one of my main concerns is that these leaders, they don't have time. They don't have time to just, sit and relax and think about things deeply, because they're all the time rushing and having to deal with this crisis or that crisis.
Mr. Harari, thank you for participating in the global conversation.
Thank you.